As we mentioned, Ukraine's government say at least 40 civilians have been killed in the latest series of Russian bombardments. Let's get the latest situation more broadly on the ground in Ukraine with retired Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, great to see you as always. Let's start with a broad snapshot of where we stand here in the war at this stage.
Yeah, well, it's day 144. Key milestone today is really the Russians to declare the end of this operational pause. Shouldn't be a great surprise. It was inevitable it's going to end eventually. It is quite a surprise. It's only 10 days long because that hasn't been enough time to regenerate combat power for the Russians. But inevitably there's a compromise with all of these decisions because every day that the Russians are pausing, it gives time for the Ukrainians to dig in, to prepare the ground. And also the Russians lose momentum, which is so difficult at times to gain and then maintain in warfare. What we are going to see now, this renewed offensive, we're going to see the continued artillery barrage and then troop movements. Siversk and Bakhmut are likely to be the first priorities here. And then once they fall, it'll be across to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. But a very animated situation on the ground.
And if we kind of step back and look at all of the land that Russia has seized across Ukraine, how do we frame this? Is this a success for them so far? Are they on the path to an overall victory, or how would you frame it?
Well, we've generally been looking at Ukraine resistance and the tenacity of their defensive forces, but the harsh reality is this red area has been expanding steadily over the last few weeks and months. If Ukraine is to turn the tide, the Western weapons, as your previous correspondent talked about, are going to be key to this. It's not just about getting the equipment to the front line and getting the soldiers trained. It's also just the logistics involved. And I use an example that the Russians have used 20,000 rounds of ammunition yesterday. Each of those rounds weighs about 50 kilograms. That's about 1 million kilograms per day of artillery that the West is going to have to move in to support any Ukrainian offensive. That takes time and will take weeks rather than days. In the meantime, the Ukrainian strategy clearly is to try to stem the Russian advance to buy themselves time. The Russians are also an occupying force. They've occupied quite a large area. That spreads them quite thin. And what's pretty clear as well is the Ukrainians are putting pressure on the far northwest in Kharkiv, also pressure on Kherson, because that forces the Russians. They don't want to see a breakthrough by Ukrainians. So do they divert more manpower to stem those advances in Kharkiv or Kherson? But if they do that, then that dilutes their main effort around the Donbass region, which they clearly won't want to do. Whatever, it is very clear that the next chapter of this devastating war in the Donbass has commenced, and it's not clear at the moment how or when it's going to end.
Sean, as always.